Hi, this is Mike Henriksen from O'Reilly Media. Today I'm going to be talking with Steve Souders from Google for our Velocity podcast series. Today's conversation is going to center around performance. Steve, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Sure. So, Steve, you've been to every Velocity, and after speaking with engineers at all these different places around the globe, how would you describe the current state of the market?
Um, yeah, about 2 years ago, I saw a lot of these factors coming together. Some of the biggest ones were, a big increase in the number of companies, mostly startup companies, offering services to make websites faster, consulting services, but also tools, reverse proxies like Cloudflare and Torbit and Strangeloop are doing. Um, and also, seeing more places where uh, velocity, web performance was being valued, not the least of which is in Google PageRank, where about a year ago they announced that website speed was going to be one of the factors in calculating PageRank. And when you ask market, I just wanted to preface that with, there is a market, there is an industry now around web performance. About a year ago, a year and a half ago, I think I wrote a radar post that launched this term I coined called WPO, Web Performance Optimization. That's the name I'm using for this emerging industry, and a lot of the startup companies and other folks, consultants in that space, have adopted that. And so, I do think that there is an industry now around WPO. It's really, kind of analogous to SEO or other services out there for web companies, but WPO is kind of unique because it offers a lot of advantages that you can achieve just by adopting these best practices of making your site faster. It drives more people to your site. If you have a better page rank, you're going to get more people to your site, and improves the user experience. There's all these case studies out there from Velocity and other folks that talk about how when they make their website faster, people spend more time on the site, do more page views. It also increases revenue. Again, lots of studies about how cart size and revenue goes up, purchases go up when a website is faster, and it reduces the company's operating costs by reducing hardware costs, energy costs, bandwidth costs, because you're reducing what the website is generating and sending. And so all of those are a big win. And so, yeah, this industry, this market is really taking off. And, another indicator of that is, how well the Velocity conference is doing. I mean, if you look, we had, our biggest year ever at Velocity US last year with over 2,000 people. I think it was like 2,300 people or something like that. And so, the market is going, and it's going to continue to grow. We did Velocity, our first Velocity Europe this year. And it's not just about velocity. I'm using velocity as a, thermometer to measure the uptake of this topic about making websites faster. And, companies and developers are, really realizing that this is a key advantage. If you have a presence on the web, it's got to be fast, and Velocity is where the experts on, how to do that and the cutting edge technologies for achieving that get together and discuss what they found.
Yeah, I think we also saw probably a 30 to 40% growth in Velocity Beijing this year compared to last year. So I think there was quite an interest in that market as well. So you mentioned WPO, and and this is kind of an odd question, but it seems like at Velocity, I've always heard web dev, web ops, DevOps, and now WPO. Are we just splitting hairs and semantics here? Is this really all the same kind of thing and the same two tribes coming together, or what do you think?
Well, the key for any new undertaking or technology is to make up some new words. And so, that's what we've done as part of Velocity. No, I'm kidding, but it is kind of cool. I mean, out of Velocity, really, these two industries. So, in case people don't know, Velocity, is really kind of two parts. web performance, and I kind of co-chair that, and operations, John Allspaw, it used to be Jesse Robbins, John Allspaw has taken over co-chairing that operations side. And when we started this in 2008, DevOps and WPO didn't exist. And so it's really kind of cool as part of being involved in Velocity, Jesse, John, and I have been able to watch and helped promote the emergence of these two industries, WPO and DevOps. And so, but as far as the terms, for most people looking in from the outside, like what's the difference? But from the inside, you asked about web dev, web ops, DevOps. Back before Velocity started, or around when Velocity started, you kind of had two people building and running the website. And those were separate groups. You had a set of developers, programmers, web devs who were building the site, writing the code. They would make sure it ran pretty well, didn't have any major bugs. And then they would throw it over the wall to the ops group. And they would push it and monitor it. And if there were problems, they would go back to the web devs and say, oh, we're having this problem, or maybe some of the problems, they could solve themselves. And what we're seeing is that like most walls that exist within companies, that doesn't produce a great outcome. And so we're seeing this thing happen, and it's been very observable at Velocity, where those two camps, the web devs, the web performance developers, and the ops folks, the web ops folks, are starting to, the boundaries are crossing now. And the term that I mostly credit Jesse for, maybe there are some other folks who helped for capturing that transition, that merging, is DevOps, where developers are starting to know a lot more about operations, and ops folks are starting to know a lot more about development. And so that's kind of what those phrases are. If your company is made up of a organization of web developers and a separate organization of web ops folks, you might want to come to Velocity and see what people are saying about the benefits of reducing those boundaries and having folks who are really good at DevOps.
Well, yeah, speaking of different types of folks that might come to Velocity, if there was such a thing as a top performance ninja in a company, what does that person do on a daily basis? I mean, if you're the top dog of performance at, let's say, Netflix, what do you do? What does your typical day look like? I mean, is it just putting out fires, or is it,
Yeah. Boy, that makes me want to launch into a really long answer, and so I'm going to have to fight that urge. Because there's a lot of work that goes into setting up a culture of performance. That's one of the things I love about being at Google, is everyone is so focused on performance, not just the developers and engineers, the marketing people and product people. Everyone cares about speed. That's why it's one of Google's 7 core principles. And so, it's kind of a long answer about, how do you create and establish and maintain that culture of performance within an organization? I guess the quick thing I'll mention is, of course, it all starts with metrics. If you want to optimize something, you have to start by measuring it. So I would say, probably the thing that the head of performance at the lead performance engineer at a company like Netflix is going to do is, he's going to have performance dashboards. He's going to, start by creating those, figuring out, do I spin up a private instance of web page tests within my company? Do I use Boomerang or Google Analytics to get real world performance metrics from my real users who are visiting my site? How do I get that into dashboards, real-time dashboards that I can, watch on an ongoing basis, and then, build up those DevOps cookbooks for how do I, start noticing and diagnosing problems with performance. The other thing that they're going to do is a lot of internal consulting. They're going to discover problems and meet with teams on how to solve those problems, but then also establish best practices within the company, so that, again, this culture, this focus on performance, where it's not, okay, we finished the product, oh, now what do we have to do to make it performant? That those practices, those best practices, are part of the development process. so that when the product is done, or when the first alpha version of it is out, it's already pretty performant because of the best practice being instilled from the very beginning.
Excellent. So you mentioned speed is really crucial, and obviously someone who's in charge of performance is going to be interested in speed. But is there a trade-off when you're trying to get to a very fast or even faster website? Are you trading off any security or reliability or scalability or any other features that your large website may need to have as well? I mean, speed just comes natural, or
No, it's a win. I mean, the only trade-off is it takes some resources to work on it. A lot of times when you establish these best practices, like, oh, we don't use a far future expires header now. We have to do that, and to do that, we have to fingerprint our resource URL so that if they change, we can use a different URL and bust the cache. And usually those best practices, once you adopt them, they're automated in your code. Like, you'll have a way of referencing a resource URL that goes through some code that adds the fingerprint hash or whatever to make those resource URLs unique, so that once you adopt the best practice, it's no extra work on an ongoing basis. It's just the cost of establishing that. And that's not true for all best practices. Some require ongoing work to adopt, but many of them, like optimizing images, creating sprites, can be automated. So that's one trade-off, is there's going to be resources that not a huge amount, but resources that have to be dedicated on implementing these best practices and doing ongoing work for some of the best practices that require that. But other than that, no, it's really not. I mean, it's a win-win-win. More users, higher revenue, lower cost. Like, it's a winning proposition. I think that's one of the reasons why Velocity has been so successful, is that it really is a winning situation. And the other part of it that I guess I should list as the fifth bullet of that elevator pitch for WPO is it's focused on quality. I mean, and people love that in general, but developers, engineers really love that. I mean, like, engineers are really focused on quality and metrics for measuring and maximizing quality. And that's really what we're preaching here, is we're preaching what are the best practices you can adopt so that what you build is really awesome quality, and people are going to look at it and go, wow, I can't see anything wrong with this. This is, the pinnacle of what you could build for an awesome website. And engineers want to do that, and even non-engineers, CEOs of companies want that. They want that sense of quality that people and customers feel about their web presence. And so, it really is a fairly easy sell.
Yeah, a lot of that comes through in Joshua Bixby's talks at Velocity about the KPIs and things like that, and the benefits and drawbacks of either having speed or not having it. But I'm curious, I've been in editorial in publishing forever, so I can never go anywhere and enjoy myself without finding the errors in someone's writing. Do you do the same thing when you go out on the web? Are you always looking at sites that are slow? Do you find things that are annoying because they're just wrong?
Yeah, I see that all the time. That's, and I use a carrot and a stick. Sometimes I contact people or, give them feedback in some way, and other times I'll write scathing blog posts, highlighting their inefficiencies. But yeah, that's what I do. I'm always seeing that, and of course, one of the reasons why I enjoy my work so much is I'm an optimization nut. Like, I just have to optimize everything, and so every website I go to isn't fast enough, and so I'm always looking, opening up packet sniffers or looking at code, trying to figure out how could this experience that I had, how could it have been faster.
So when you're doing that, when you're analyzing someone else's site or yours or whoever's, aren't there fluctuations in your connection that you're starting with? So when you connect to the internet, how do you figure out that one day my connection, through I have FiOS at home, is slower than yesterday? Do you know, is there some sort of metric that you're watching to make sure that you're not measuring the slowness of your carrier versus the slowness of a website?
Yeah, you can do things like you can measure your connection speed. There's various tools out there to do that. I just saw yesterday AT&T released this Android plugin called Arrow, A-R-O, that does some of this. I haven't downloaded it yet, but I've read some of their research leading up to this tool. So, there are various tools out there that you can use to measure your connection speed. But it's kind of interesting, like I mentioned the, focus on quality just a minute ago. The two, most popular performance link tools out there are YSlow and PageSpeed. And they both give you a score for how well your site is following these best practices. And neither of them look at your connection speed or your page load time. Neither of them take time into consideration at all. They're just looking at how the site was built. Regardless of whether the page was fast or not, if you're not using sprites, if you're not gzipping your JavaScript, if you're not using a far future expires header, you have low quality. And even if it's pretty fast now, if you adopted these best practices, you could make it even faster. And so, the actual connection speed that you're using, isn't necessarily that important when you're trying to find what should I work on to make my site faster. Now, if you're doing, there are situations where it is, really important. If you're, doing, measuring page load time as part of a continuous build process so that when people add new features before you launch it, you can detect whether it's going to really slow down the user experience. You'd want to do that on some, reliable, repeatable network. So there are ways to do that with DummyNet or, other things. So that is a variable, but actually a lot of the optimizations that you're looking at really hold true regardless of fluctuations in connection speed.
Okay. So how does someone go about finding the latest and greatest tools for performance? I mean, how does a performance engineer, do they go to your site? Where do they go to find the tools? Google? Just Google in performance tools?
Yeah, I feel like I guess we are doing a commercial here a little bit. The jacket I'm wearing today, Velocity. Okay, so, all kidding aside, go to Velocity. We've got 3 of them now. We've got, webcasts that we do, online conferences. And we just started, hats off to O'Reilly. I saw about a month ago the Velocity newsletter has started going out. That's really awesome. So tune into Velocity.
And this podcast series, I may be covering the different tools with the author of the tool.
Yeah. So, like I said, people love this stuff. It's a win. So go to Velocity, tune into Velocity, read my blog. There's a exceptional performance mailing list in Yahoo Groups. Just search for exceptional performance. A couple thousand people on the list, very low spam. So that's a good source. There's perfplanet.com. That's run by Sergey out of the New York Web Performance Meetup Group, and Stoyan, formerly from the Yahoo Exceptional Performance Group, now over at Facebook. So perfplanet.com, go there. They have an RSS aggregator for a lot of the performance blogs out there. So you could read my blog, Joshua Bixby's blog, lots of other good blogs out there, or just subscribe to the PerfPlanet blog. And the other thing PerfPlanet does every December is they have their web performance calendar of blog posts.
Yes.
And it's, go back all the previous years. This year, was 32 articles, all of them, really valuable.
You can circle them.
Velocity and perfplanet.com.
Yep, and also in Google Plus too. You can find it.
I'm sorry?
You can find it also in Google Plus. Stoyan has
performance
calendar in Google Plus, so you can always circle him and get it as well. I love Google Plus, but that's a different story, different conversation.
And that's coming from the O'Reilly guy. The Google guy didn't even say that. Thanks, Mike.
It's a combination of Facebook and Twitter and blogging all in one for me, so I love it. But So here's a question that I wonder if people that haven't gone to Velocity struggle with. They've got a website that their users have told them it's slow, and they go through a 6 month to year redesign and get it all nice and fast, and they think they've made great progress. But the world has progressed faster than them. How do they know when they finally have a fast enough website?
Well, yeah, people from the very beginning, people have asked that question, and I've been pushed many times to give a absolute value for how fast a website has to be considered fast or fast enough. And you can try to do that. It varies by website and the vertical market that website is in and what the competitors are doing. And that's one way to look at it. The way I look at it is more from the quality perspective. Like, you want to be proud of your work, and you want to do the best job you can, within, what's feasible and the resources that you have. And so I really try to focus on the quality. If there's something you could be doing better, and you have pretty good clues that that's going to be a significant improvement, then try to find time to work on that. And if you're doing the best you can, then that's about what you can do. So that's a little hand wavy answer to that, but I can get more specific. There's a feature in Google Webmaster Tools, I think it's called Site Speed, that will track your website speed and compare it to the rest of the websites being tracked. And so it'll show you, are you in the top 10%, the bottom 20%, are you about in the middle? So it doesn't do it by vertical market. So if you're in travel, you're also being compared to search engines and, finance companies. But, it'll give you an idea how you compare to the rest of the web. And the other thing you can do is get real world metrics. And, a good, easy way to do that is with Google Analytics, which a lot of websites are already using. A couple months ago, we added page load time measurements to that. And you can get those for free and track them over time. But your question was really about, things change. How do I know if I'm still fast enough? And that a lot of that is a comparison to other people. And you can do, you can find comparisons to other websites. Like I think Keynote publishes, page load time data for across various websites. But there aren't really good deep sources for that kind of information.
So let's take that company that started out 18 months ago and they re-engineered their website and they got a faster site, and now from their industry it's fast enough. And now you throw in mobile and all these devices connecting to their site and wanting to read it on their tablets. Is mobile disrupting this whole performance quest for engineers? Is it making it more difficult because you've got so many different mobile devices?
Yeah, it's making it a lot harder. I don't know if I'd call that disrupting, but it's adding more complexity to what we have to do. Luckily, a lot of the I'd say 80+%, maybe 90% of the best practices we had for desktop are still useful on mobile. Some of those if you look at a specific best practice, it might be more important on mobile or less important on mobile than compared to desktop, but it's still going to be positive. So if you're adopting those best practices, you're moving in the right direction. But there are certainly other best practices that have emerged as performance gurus have focused on mobile, and so it's a different platform, and it's also a more challenging platform because connection speeds are typically slower, CPU power is typically less, disk space and therefore caching is usually less. So it's a more challenging proposition, and that's why for the last about 2 years ago we started talking about mobile, and last year we had a mobile track. It's important to get those best practices and new discoveries about mobile performance to get those out there.
And would you say the same thing is happening with HTML5 as well? Is that kind of making more challenges and more engineers have to really figure out what they're doing with HTML5 so they don't slow down their site inadvertently?
I think it's different. I think it's actually reducing complexity a little bit. It's making things easier. There aren't many things in HTML5 that can hurt you. If you do too many custom fonts, or depending on your platform, if you're using a lot of the CSS3, which we kind of lump in with HTML5, things like gradients, you can, sometimes the bandwidth savings are overwritten by the CPU time it takes to do some of those new things. But a lot of the things, like gradients or border radius within reason, are WebSockets are going to, open up more doors and make it easier to have high performance websites. And so, maybe it's a little adds more complexity because it's new stuff that you have to learn. But by learning it, if it actually makes your job easier in the long run, it's going to be a win.
Okay. So
local storage. Check out local storage.
Local storage.
Right.
So I think we need to wrap this up. I guess we'll be seeing you in Santa Clara in a couple months, 3 months maybe. You must be a kid in the candy store right now, though, looking at all the proposals that are coming in for Velocity.
Velocity just keeps breaking records. I guess it's our own record, so I guess we're just growing. But we had over 300 last year. I think when all the dust settled, was around 270 proposals, and last I checked, it was in the low 300s, 320, 340, something like that.
And a lot of great talks.
I'm sorry.
And a lot of great talks are in there already. I mean,
yeah.
So
a lot of proposals, and again, that's a metric, a thermometer on the interest in this space, both by people discovering and adopting these best practices, and the companies who want to share what they're doing with their services. So yeah, I can't wait to. We have a almost brand new program committee. We want to kind of get some new blood into the Velocity family. And so, in fact, one of my to-do list items today is to send out the email to kick off the proposal review process with our program committee. So we're going to be, and it give us some time. With 300 proposals, it's going to take a while, probably a month or two. But we'll get back to everyone and let you know who we're selecting. We've already lined up a couple good keynote speakers, and yeah, Velocity in June is going to be great.
Yeah, I think the bar has been raised too, because Santa Clara last year was great, and then all of a sudden Berlin, and that was fantastic. And Beijing, from what we heard in English, was outstanding as well. So I think the bar just keeps getting higher and higher. So should be great.
Yeah, and I think the place for us, last year I think the exhibit hall really broke out. I mean, we had a lot of people, and the exhibit hall really broke out. The thing I'm looking for this year is more community breakout. And we kind of saw a nice glimpse of that in Berlin, where we had like an unconference the day before. I think we're going to try to do an unconference the day after Velocity this year. And we're going to try to get more community groups. We just had an email go out to Sisters this week, and all the web performance meetups. And I'd really like Velocity to be the place where all the performance and operations-minded community groups use that as the annual gathering place to have annual meetings or more face-to-face meetings. So I'm really looking forward to that this year, is more community breakout and having a lot more of those hallway and evening and before and after conversations where people can really connect and share things on a more individual basis and get valuable best practices to take away when you go back to work next week.
Yep, excellent. Steve, thank you for your time. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you in Santa Clara in a few months.
Yeah, Mike, I haven't seen you since Beijing. It's good to see you again, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right, take care. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.